Hi, my name is Chris Sturhan. Welcome to another episode of Drinks from Eddie Muller's Noir Bar. Each week I take a chapter from the book Eddie Muller's Noir Bar, Cocktails Inspired by the World of Film Noir, and I talk about the film in that chapter and I make the drink associated with it. Today marks the 50th episode of this series and actually the last chapter in the book that we haven't already covered. I probably am going to be doing a kind of a wrap-up summary video after this, just to say, what I learned doing this series of videos. But I may take a short break before I jump back into doing another series like this, even though there is a pre-code cocktails book available at this point. But I'm going to hold off on jumping into that for right now. Now, the film we're going to be looking at today is the film from 1946, Gilda, and the drink we're going to be having is champagne and Gildas. And I'll explain what that means at the end of this. Now, Gilda was released in 1946. It was directed by Charles Vidor, no relation to the more famous director King Vidor. Charles Vidor, I looked him up on IMDb. He made quite a few films, but about the only one I really recognized was this one. He was a second unit director underneath Frank Capra on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but when I looked at the rest of the films that he directed, none of them were even as close to as famous as Gilda was. I'm sure I've probably seen some of them, but none of them jumped out at me, at least by looking at the name in the list on IMDb. Now, Gilda is set immediately after World War II. Glenn Ford is an American who is in Argentina. He is in the middle of a crap game where he's winning big and realizes that he kind of needs to take his winnings and go before the people he won all the money from take him apart. And as he is counting his money up in the wrong alley, somebody tries to rob him, and a stranger comes forward and saves him, and that stranger would be George McCready, and he has a friend who protects him, and that friend is a cane with a sword in it, and he saves Glenn Ford from that, and they talk for a little while, and George McCready says, well, if he likes gambling, there's a casino he knows about, and he gives him a key that will get him into the casino, but he warns him that A, he will need a tie, and also they won't let him bring his own dice. So naturally, Glenn Ford, being the gambling man he is, goes out and gets a tie and heads to the casino. Now, he doesn't need his own dice to be able to win. He has a very unique way of cutting cards at the 21 table, and he wins a lot of money at 21. And as often happens when you're winning too much, you end up talking to some guys in the back room who work for the casino with pushed-in noses that are going to make you look like you've got a pushed-in nose. And they rough him up a little bit, and then George McCready shows up again. Turns out he is the owner of the casino, and Glenn Ford convinces him that he should hire him because he kind of knows the ropes of what happens in a casino and how cheaters cheat, and working for him, he would be an honest man and would be looking out for his best interest. And that works out, and very, very soon Glenn Ford is actually the manager of the casino. When he discovers that there's something else going on, there is a payment happening that definitely looks like a bribe, but he's not sure what's going on with it, because if it was a straight bribe, it probably should show up on the books of the casino. Well, George McCready explains that it's something different, but he doesn't want to tell him what it is. Fairly soon after this, George McCready goes out and goes on a little trip. He comes back and he has met and married Rita Hayworth. And it turns out Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford had been an item back in the States. And I assume it ended badly. They don't really ever say that, but the way they deal with each other is only the way people who have been in a relationship that went south really bad deal with each other, and that's very apparent from the way they are. Um, Fairly soon, uh, uh, Glenn Ford gets the trust of George McCready, and he lets him in on his secret. It's actually a cartel that is using some patents and some tungsten mines to create a very, very internationally powerful cartel. But it turns out they were being financed by ex-Nazis, and the Nazis kind of went back in on it, and George McCready doesn't want to give up anything. The other thing that's going on is Rita Hayworth, of course, to get at Glenn Ford more so than George McCready, she wants to play around with other men. And since George McCready is the husband, he puts Glenn Ford in charge of making sure she isn't doing that, which makes him happy no end. Yes. So anyway, that's what's going on. I've seen this movie a lot of times. I was never a huge fan of this movie until the first time I saw it in on Noir Alley. And I think the reason I didn't like it was that I didn't really see much in the way of chemistry between Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford. And it kind of made me not care that much about them and their relationship, so they could do shitty things to each other all day, and it really didn't have any effect on me. Well, Eddie Muller, when he introduced this film, when he played it on Noir Alley, suggested that the real relationship here is not between Glenn Ford and Rita Hayworth, it's between Glenn Ford and George McCready. They had this wonderful, suggested gay bromance going on, and then then Rita Hayworth comes in and just screws it all up. And they were doing just fine, and then this bitch shows up and everything goes completely haywire. And once I started looking at this movie from that point of view, it made it so much better and so much more enjoyable. I really like it a lot now, and it's just because of that little suggestion put in my head. And when you watch the movie from that angle, it definitely works. So thank you, Eddie, for planning that in my head back however many years ago that was. Anyway, so we're going to be taking a short break, and I will set up the drink, which is champagne and Gildas. Now, champagne I'm actually using Prosecco, which is an Italian sparkling wine, because I could find a small bottle relatively inexpensive. And Gildas is actually an hors d'oeuvre, and it's the only appetizer covered in the film, but it was one that was created and named after Rita Hayworth's character in this movie. So I made some of those, and we'll get those, and we'll have those when I come back. I hope you stick around for it. Thanks. And we are back. So last week I mentioned with the Bloody Mary that I'd put off doing the Bloody Mary just because I kind of grew up thinking tomato juice was disgusting and gross, so I put off making the Bloody Mary because of that. Well, I have a sort of similar story with the Gildas here. Now, Gildas is an hors d'oeuvre that is made with guindilla peppers, which unfortunately I could not find. They're a Spanish style of peppers. The closest I could come with two of them was an Italian pepper called Lombardy peppers, and I hope those are a decent substitute, but that's what we've got, and that's what we're going to go with. But it has cocktail onions and olives and cornichons. I think that's cornichons, which is a very tart pickle. But the last ingredient in this hors d'oeuvre is anchovies. And I have a similar story about anchovies in that right after I graduated college, I had trouble finding a job. I worked at a pizza place. I worked at Round Table Pizza, and we had anchovies as one of our ingredients. And hardly anybody ever ordered anchovies. And I'm sure we probably went through one can of anchovies about every 9 months. So by the time you were getting to the point where you were making a pizza with it, it probably had been open for 3 or 4 months and smelled very fishy and, you know, seemed very gross. The can itself probably had, you know, 20 people's fingers touching it, because back then who wore gloves to make pizzas? You know, would have been, you know, in the 80s. So I was not looking forward to the whole anchovy thing. But I did go out and buy some anchovies, and when I first opened the can, they smelled considerably less fishy than I would have imagined, so that's a good thing. So we're going to give it a shot and see what it is. It seems less bad than I thought it would be, but we'll have to see how it actually works. Now, I've never seen a bottle like this, so I'm just going to try pulling on it. Ooh, it didn't pop. I hope this is carbonated. Otherwise, I might have completely screwed up this video. Anyway, so we're going to do our... Oh, it definitely is carbonated. Kind of disappointing we don't have the pop of the bottle, but it is definitely a champagne adjacent thing. And so I'm not sure how you're supposed to do this, but the Gilda in question, to me, it seems a little bit like a piece of sushi. It's like looks like it's a little bit too big to eat in one bite, but I can't imagine how you would eat it other than in one bite. So we're just going to give it a shot. It's actually pretty good. Kind of like them. I got a very small, excuse me. I got a very small thing of anchovies that only had about 7 or 8 fillets in it, so I was only able to make 8 of these things. But you're getting a lot of pickly flavors. I'm definitely not too worried about the anchovies, and actually, it kind of makes I'm not a huge fan of champagne, but it kind of makes the champagne come out a little bit better, because you have all these sour flavors coming in, and it makes the champagne seem more sweet. So I'm going to call this one good. I'm going to call this one a winner, and which is good because this is the last one, the last official one I'm doing. I don't know that you can see it from here, but the glass I'm drinking out of is the one that they gave us at the 10th TCM Film Festival back in 2019, which was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the network. So from a booth in the back of Eddie Muller's Noir Bar, we're going to say cheers. And don't forget, next week I'm going to do a quick summary video of what I learned from doing this series of videos. I hope you tune in for that. Thanks a lot. Cheers.